Morocco, everyone. Halikoa. That's how are you? If you're wondering, that is Loko-jan, the indigenous mother tongue of Jamaica, the language of our Lokono ancestors, whom you may know as the Arawak. Today on Tribal Tea Talk, we visit Guyana, the land of many waters, to connect with our Lokono sister there. She's from the indigenous community of Wakapau. Wakapau is a Loko-jan word that is derived from a combination of wakwakwa, which is the word for a pigeon, and the word pow, the distinct onomatopoeic sound made with the hands when you are in the water. Wakapau. Now our sister that will be joining us is a language activist and translator of Loko-jan, language of the Lokono people. During the pandemic, she and her team worked tirelessly on translating signs and posters for her community into Loko-jan. She currently works actively in the preservation of indigenous languages and is vocal on social issues in her country. Let's connect with our sister.
Hello.
Good morning, my dear sister. How are you doing?
Morocco. Good morning. I'm fine, thankfully.
I'm glad to hear that. I'm glad to hear that. So, we are here with our sister Samantha. Samantha, please tell us about yourself, your passions, and the work that you do.
Morocco Namaka. Greetings, everyone. My name is Skeitha Sabantho Oñi Thomas, and I'm also known as Samantha Thomas. I am 40 years old, mother of three. I'm an advocate for indigenous peoples in my country, Guyana, and a very passionate language activist.
Thank you very much for sharing that with us, my dear sister. And can you tell us about your home in Wakapau? What is it like? What are the main activities of the community?
Okay, so Wakapau, it's home, it's lovely, but to me and to the people of Wakapau, we see our village differently, from others. It's not that how should I say developed in some ways, but Wakapau is definitely a peaceful place. It's the people there, they're all always welcoming. Most maybe like 95% of the people who live in Wakapau are Lokonos. They have a few warels and also very few amount of Caribs living there, but we all live in one. And Wakapau is known for the most fluent local speakers of Loko-jan, which is our language, the Lokono Nation's language. The community itself, it's not well, it's the population is about just over 3,000. People mostly do farming, small businesses, fishing.
Okay, thank you for sharing with us. And what, in your opinion, do you think that the community would need to develop? What do you think would make the community better, in your opinion?
Being that there are mostly farmers in the community, I've always thought about like creating jobs by either building like a factory where people can sell their stuff, whatever they're
Mm-hmm.
planting, and so you could have like an income generating system within the communities.
Yes.
And of course, you don't have to go out of the community to seek employment, and especially for the youths who are in school, you can support your children in that way.
Mm-hmm.
Because as it is right now, even if you have produce and you want to sell, you have to travel a long distance and it's very costly.
Mm-hmm.
So definitely, creating employment would be a plus for the community.
Okay, okay. Thank you for sharing that. And you mentioned, that Lokono is widely spoken in Wakapau. Can you share with us, especially for our listeners who are not quite familiar, because especially in the wider Caribbean, the Lokono people are referred to as Arawak. So can you, for our listeners, for the benefit of our listeners, please explain what is Lokono and why we call it Lokono?
Well, Lokono is one of the very few Arawakan languages that are still spoken in some parts of South America, and there's very few in the Caribbean. Yes, it is an Arawakan language, and fortunately for us here in Guyana, there are a few communities that have, very few speakers. And what about my community? We have the most speakers.
Mm-hmm.
My mom was a teacher of our language, culture, and traditions. She taught me and everyone around, all that she knew. One of my parents were fluent speakers. Most of the elders in the community, well, all of the elders are fluent speakers. The middle-aged persons, even if they don't speak fluently, they understand it to a reasonable level. And even the children, you know, when you speak to them, they know and they can recognize Loko-jan. Well, that's the name we call it. Loko-jan is actually a contraction of Lokono and Ajiang. Ajiang meaning language. So Loko-jan is the people's language. So for a number of years now, I have started, revitalization, preservation, and I try to promote the language as much as I can. And it has taught me a lot more about, you know, my culture, my traditions, and I try to keep it alive in whatever way I can. So it's a passion for me to keep my language and culture and traditions alive. I can safely say that today I teach Loko-jan to whoever is interested, not only the language, the culture, and different aspects of the tradition.
Thank you, my dear sister. And for many who are not aware, our sister is very active in the revitalization of the Lokono language. She works tirelessly to promote the language and to instill a sense of pride in the language. Can you share with our listeners why it is so important for you that the Lokono community continues to speak its mother tongue?
I must say, I'm not a Christian, but I do believe that there is a higher power out there, and we were all made differently. Uh, for that reason, I know that our heritage is true. It exists in many ways. Therefore, as a proud Lokono woman, it is more than just a passion in me. It is an obligation for me to continue to preserve and revitalize, promote my language, my culture as a person. Even if the outsiders, even without their help, this is one part of our peoples
It's a part of
that,
us.
yes, it is a part of us, and therefore I think that my children and my grandchildren, you know, this knowledge must be passed on to the next generation because our language, it defines us. It separates us from different people because we were made that way. We're
Mm-hmm.
not, we're different ethnicities, we have different backgrounds, we have different heritages. And it's up to us to preserve our own, to share it with the world and with the next generation. So
Thank
that is what keeps that driving force behind me to continue what I do.
Thank you so much, sister, for sharing with us. And, it really reaffirms, especially for those of us in the wider Caribbean, a lot of people have been so disconnected from their mother tongue. So it's truly inspirational that you are continuing to fight not just for yourself and your children and your children's children, but for your community as a whole. And we really want to recognize you for the struggle that you've been a part of all this time. Your tireless work, especially your activism. We've seen you go on the University of Guyana working, hand in hand with them to ensure that our languages are recognized, because other people around the world, they have their languages, and so you are doing your part to ensure that our languages too are respected and recognized, and that the next generation will have these things which are our inheritance from our ancestors to pass on to their children. So we really want to applaud you for your work in that regard, and especially in your general activism, because right now a lot of our listeners may not be aware there are social issues in Guyana. Would you like to speak about those issues, especially in
Yes,
regards to the protest?
yes. So right now it is just a sad situation where we in Guyana here we are faced with so many hardships as indigenous people. But one of the worst cases right now that we are dealing with, one of our daughters, she was merely 15 years old, and we have a case right now where she wrote a letter to our president and she detailed a horrible, this thing is so gruesome, of being raped by one of our government officials. It is, it is so, it's hard for me to talk about being a mother. I feel so hurt and angry and helpless for this young lady. She is a young local girl, and for for all that she's been through, it is heartrending to know that our people, they say it's just an allegation, but if you read the transcripts of her letter, it is so vivid. And I've personally never thought of it as just an allegation because I can feel her pain when I read what she wrote. And we're trying. We are protesting. We have been protesting all week. Last week, we had a candlelit vigil. We continue protesting every day. We go out there because we are seeking justice. We're seeking justice for this young lady. And even though the process of the everything to do with the investigation and all of that is going on right now, you know, we have to continue to fight because if we don't, our voices will not be heard. And I would I would be so hurt to know if nothing can be done about this situation. Because if we, the indigenous people of this country here, the First Nations of Guyana, if our government, the people that are put there to, how should I say, to govern this country, to take care of its people, if
Mm-hmm.
they're taking advantage of us to this level, we have to speak out. Nobody is representing us. We have to represent our own. And we have to speak out against these ills that we continue to face in this country.
Thank you so much for sharing, sister, and thank you for highlighting the importance of speaking out against these social issues, because if no one speaks out, if no one says anything, these things will continue to happen. And so it's very important that we raise awareness of these issues that are happening, and it's very important that we come together and have a sense of solidarity and support each other in these issues. So, I first of all, I want to thank you for caring, about what is going on in your country, for caring about what is happening with your fellow Lokono sisters, and for what is happening in your community, because it takes more of us to care in order for there to be a difference. So I really want to applaud you for that. And this is an issue that we've been following closely, especially as more and more people continue to speak out about the issue. We have been following it closely, so we want to thank you for sharing some shedding some light on that and raising awareness on that issue. Another thing that we've been following closely, going a bit further away from where we are, there's an issue that's happening in Ghana where the women, they're speaking out against period poverty and injustice against women in different forms. So one of the things that I would like to ask you, is it easy to get access to menstrual products in Guyana and specifically in Wakapau?
I think it's more accessible in the city.
Mm-hmm.
Um, People have their jobs that they can go to. They can, provide for their own, and you know, having these things accessible is part of your, how should I say, your monthly needs, right?
Yes, it's our
So
monthly reality.
yes. So when you have a job and you know what you have to get, your necessities, of course you will cater for that and all these. But when you live in a community like Wakapau, there are very few, less than 5% of the people of Wakapau are employed. Therefore, I can I can say this from experience that many times, even growing up as a young woman, and I have nieces, who go through this, the present day, sometimes when that time comes around, you don't even have the money to get stuff for yourself, to get the sanitary napkins, and
And then
it's
you
it's
mentioned that
it's
these things
hard in
are
a way that
available in the
it is
city.
there. It's in it may be there at the shops, but
Mm-hmm.
then the fund, you don't have the money. The funds are not there to cater for these things. Not always. So sometimes we have to resort to other things, and it's like it has just become a norm, like normal
Mm-hmm.
for most persons. I remember going to school uh, when it's that time of the month. You can't go to school, right? If it's a week or 2 weeks, you have to stay home. Because our people, we have our own traditions when it comes to a young woman, or even a woman. Then when you're going through their menstrual cycle, they're not supposed to go in or over the water.
Mm-hmm.
Therefore, if you if well, that was my time in school. I'm not sure how it goes right now with everybody, if they're still accepted in school when they have their menstrual period. But at that time, I remember it was, you can tell when somebody's not in school, especially a young woman. You can tell that, this is why this person is not in school. And then, the teachers would accept that at that time.
Mm-hmm.
Because in our tradition, if a young woman has her period and she bathes in the creek, or she even travels over the water, it will disturb the spirits.
Mm-hmm.
And I have seen with my own eyes what has happened to a lot of young women, especially those who are in the secondary school and they stay at the dorms,
Mm-hmm.
because of this tradition that we uphold in the community. there are things that happen. When you break these rules, it has consequences.
Yes, yes.
So other than being true to our tradition, the only the only obstacle I should say when it comes to that is the hardships of finding the money to get your necessities when it comes to your period.
And you,
Sometimes you may have it, sometimes
mhm,
especially for people who have like 4 or 5 children,
it adds
it's
up.
tough.
Yes. So you mentioned that these products would be available in the city outside of Wakapau, and for a lot of our listeners, they do not understand where Wakapau is, and that you would have to travel by boat. So that would raise the cost, especially if it would be available in a local store in the community. That would add mark up the cost significantly, especially as you have to factor in getting these products to the community in the first place. So I guess that would also lead to our next question, which I think you have already answered, which would be, what about the pricing of these products? Do they make that life difficult for the women in your community?
Definitely, definitely. The price of things in my community is 3, sometimes 4 times the price of things in Georgetown. That's in the city, or even on the coastline, like the Eskimo coast. You know, because of the cost of transportation. So if something costs, like in Georgetown, if you pay $500 for a pack of of sanitary napkins,
Mm-hmm.
you're more likely to pay like around $1,200 or more for it in Wakapau.
Wow. Wow.
Yeah.
And so one of the things you mentioned earlier was the fact that, a lot of the people in the community, they are either agriculturalists or self-employed in some respect, but it's still difficult because of the lack of access to the community. It's not very easy to leave and enter the community based on the fact that it is accessible by boat. So would women in the community be open to the local production of period products, such as, the pads and the underwear, herbal medicines for the period symptoms, stuff like that? Would the women in the community be open to, some kind of local production of these things in the community?
Yes, I would say yes. There would be. In our community, when we're given the opportunity to do anything that would uplift ourselves in any way, most of the men would be out of the village. Most
Mm-hmm.
times, so it's the women who, try to uplift ourselves, try to
Mm-hmm.
work with each other, you know, in any way possible. You know, if if somebody can, make a dress, if somebody has a machine, you can make a dress, and I don't have cash to pay you. I pay you in kind.
Mm-hmm.
I bring some
Bartering.
cassava bread, some other stuff, and that's how we get along in the village, because the money is not. It doesn't. It's not circulating in our community the way it would in other places.
Wow. And so, if the women and girls in the Wakapau community had, say, the ways and means within the community to produce these things that they need and to make money from their handiworks, you're saying that this would be better for them. Would you say that this would make them want to stay in the community more? Because I can imagine that, especially as things are harder to access, things are more expensive because of the transportation involved, that these myriad of factors would all collectively contribute to a brain drain issue in the community. So are you saying that if they had these ways and means, which would of course provide employment to them, are you saying that this would cause them to want to stay in the community? Do you think that this would be attractive to them in this regard?
Definitely, this would be, you know, it would be a huge plus for the community, especially for the women.
Thank you. And our final question: what message do you have to the world regarding the rights of indigenous women and girls and how they should be treated? What would you like to say to the world in that regard?
Well, as a humanitarian, I would like to say that we are people too. I mean, we are just as equal as everyone. It matters not to your skin color or your hair texture. We need equal opportunities. We need to be treated equally, just as everyone else. We feel the same pain. We feel the same joy, and especially for those people who are listening there and can bring some sort of representation, or just speak on our behalf. Just let the world know that indigenous people, we are just the same as you are, and we need similar representation. We definitely need to speak up more. If you can help us to speak up about everything, be it your culture, your social status, economics, in whatever way there is that, the rest of the world are represented and the people are taken care of in some sort of aspect. We the indigenous people, we need that also. We need you to help us to help ourselves as well.
And that's
Thank you.
very important and powerful, sister. I really want to thank you for sharing. Our sister says help us to help ourselves. Wow.
Definitely.
And sister, I want to thank you so much for sharing with us. Well, can you how do we say thank you in Lokono?
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, my sister. Thank you. And I really want to thank you for sharing with us. Thank you for sharing your knowledge, your fire, and thank you for inspiring our listeners to keep our languages alive, speak out for our rights, and just work together to make our communities better. Thank you so much, sister.
You are most welcome. Maburika.